magic of the Sunstone. You're tuned into the Jewel Riders Archive.
Hey Jewel fans, welcome to another episode of the Jewel Riders Archive podcast.
Well, I guess
today
it's
we're
time
continuing
to
our
leave
discussion with Greg
reality and jump into
Autore,
the wild
toy
magic
designer and
travel
art
back
director of the show.
Actually, let me ask you some questions first.
Yes.
I went through the materials that I have left, which are not that much, but I've got some things left. And
sure
some odd little
treasures.
surprises, probably. Treasures. I sent you the picture of the one little dress I have. Now,
Yes.
I know that I've got a couple of the unicorn horns that are in purple. They're just not, I thought they were in this box. They're not. But I found a couple other things. I wanted to just ask if you had them first. So one I know you don't have is an early line drawing of the Princess Gwenevere doll. I'll probably just scan that and send it to you.
Oh, that would be amazing.
I do have also they're the paint master call-out drawings for the two horses.
Oh, fantastic.
So they're really nice drawings of the horses, and then it's got all of the, clear wings, airbrush purple, 247C with gold glitter. They're just kind of neat for the people who are interested in toys. Those are just black and whites. I was looking for some of the early stuff that changed. So, I've got nice photographs of the child size, the Power Heart and the Power Sun and the Power Moonstone. These were record photos from inside Hasbro.
Okay.
So they're not what was used in the catalog. They're at 3/4 views. They're kind of nice, but so anyway, I have those. I've got photographs of the first final Gwenevere doll, but pre-production. So it's still a hand sample. You probably already have photographs of the zebra corn, right?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
But depending on
so
which one it is, I mean, I don't know which photograph you're looking at. We have it that's on like a grayish, purplish, kind of like those old Olin Mills type of backgrounds.
Yes. Okay, so I've got one that has the mask off, and I've got one that's on a normal grayish background without all the little holes in it. That is just a beauty shot of the figure. Probably what was used for the catalog. Actually, wait. It didn't show up in the catalog, did it? Or
No, it did. It did. Yeah, they have in one of the Toy Fair catalogs, it has Shadow Song with the what was to be released second wave toys.
That's right. Okay, and in fact, I pulled those to see so that I could talk intelligently when you ask me questions. Then I found some variations of Tamara's outfit where it's all white with and a fluffier Tamara, and it's got teal edging, but we went away from that. And then I've got one which is actually really cool too. That is two different ones. That the fabric, it's what we in the industry call crystal pleating, which is basically a very thin tricot that's pleated. Unfortunately, we couldn't afford it. It's really cool. And there's a green version, a teal version, and then there's a white version. You'd probably get a kick out of these because these are, obviously, in fact, one of them. Wait a second. Both of them are on Wonder Woman dolls instead of the final dolls.
Ooh, I'd love to see that because I love Wonder Woman and the Star Riders.
Yeah. I mean, you have to look. Well, actually, what they're. Let me back up. So Wonder Woman and the Star Riders, of course, that tooling I used for the Disney musical Princess.
Right.
So it's the same bodies. and these are the Disney princesses' heads. So I guess I should have said it that way, but I still think of it as Wonder Woman first because that's where I stole the tooling from. And they never shipped, of course. There's another outfit here I want to send you that's a picture of. It is a asymmetric gown of ball gown of Gwenevere. It's actually really cute, but the reason I went away from it was I decided to put all asymmetric qualities on to help her look more odd and evil. So everything but her crown is asymmetrical. And so when I did that, I realized, no, I need to make her symmetrical. So I went away from this, even though it's really cute. And it's also based on, in fact, it's a Jasmine doll, I can tell, because the skin tone and the earrings are still on it. Anyway, so you probably get a kick out of that. There's an early version of, and these are really nice photographs, early version of, I forgot her name. I'm blanking, dark-haired girl.
Fallon?
Fallon, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Sorry, and that wasn't her original name, which is why I'm still blanking on it.
Alex.
Okay, so interesting dress of hers. Alex, that's right, it was Alex originally. Mm-hmm. Interesting dress of hers. It's kind of 50s, but it's still fun. The very first really starting to look like Gwenevere doll. That would probably be fun to have. Also, I've got, and I think you guys may have this already, it's the official fact sheet for Princess Gwenevere and the Jewel Riders. Do you have that?
Well,
it was a
what's on the front?
Double-sided print. Okay, the front, it looks like a TV screen with the Princess Gwenevere characters on it, and they're
with them holding up their jewels.
Yes.
Yeah, we have that.
And on the back. Okay, so you got all the information on the back.
Yeah,
right?
we do. Uh-huh.
Okay, so you don't need that one.
No,
all right. Okay. So these other ones, what I'll do is I'll shoot pictures of them and send them. Just odds and ends for development along the way. I wanted to tell one story. I don't know if I told you this. Did I tell you this story before about the heart stones and the power stones, really? So we were making these, and they were, child size, so that the children could pretend to be Gwenevere or be Fallon or Tamara. And so it was a child-sized stone that would also light up. And actually, when we made these, they were one of the very first times that Hasbro used technology where they did all of the engineering in the computer. Before, they just did drawings, and then it was sent off somewhere else. But this was the first time they created the whole 3D file of a toy. They didn't do it very often in that time period. But these ones were all done in the computer. But the funny story is this. So they had to hit a certain price point. It's always about price point.
Of course.
Yeah. The engineers came to me one day saying we got a problem. We have to get 0.2% out of the margin, and the only way we can do that is to drop out the switch that turns it off and on. And so I think we've just destroyed the whole product. And I said, well, hold on a second. So I talked him through. I said, can you give me just you still have a button there. So if I push, can you make it so if you push the button, it just pushes a leaf spring, makes the connection and turns it on? They said, yeah, we can afford that. I'm like, okay, don't worry about it. Oh, but management will never accept that because it's not as good. I said, hold on, just relax. I will sell this in. And so I went into the meeting and said, hey, we've got the new jewel stones. They're all set and they're in cost, and we were able to improve them at the same time. So instead of just turning them off and on, now you can flash them. I'm sitting there going, flash, at upper management with these things, which you couldn't do before, technically. And they were like, hey, okay. And then the engineers just kind of shook their head at me like, he's weird. But it's kind of, sometimes you just got to reposition things and look at things differently and go, well, actually, we can make that better. It's cheaper. So I thought that was a fun story. It's a shame those never came out because I think kids would have loved them. We found my granddaughter. My granddaughter is not quite 2 yet, and her favorite cartoon is Moana. She loves Moana. And the other day she was taking the ring, her mom's ring, and holding it up in the air. And we're like, what are you doing? She's like, I forgot what word she used, but basically she was playing that end scene. She's not even 2, and she's playing that end scene at the movie where Moana holds up the heart of Rafiki, or whatever its name was.
Tafiti,
Tafiti, that's it. You'd think I'd know the name by now after watching it. And she was trying to say what she was doing. I finally figured it out and said, wait a second, that's Moana, and she's holding up the stone. And she goes, yes, Moana. But it's like, and so we actually ordered her a necklace so she could do that with. But cute. I thought it was really funny. Yeah, so she's gonna love that. It lights up too. She's gonna love it when it shows up in a couple of days. Mm-hmm. But it was neat that, even she's not even 2 and she's already playing that. And so I really wanted the kids to have sunstones and heartstones and moonstones that they could go play with. So it's a shame those didn't happen. But at least for the collectors, there was a couple sets of the prototypes that are out there. So
right. And we are lucky enough to have one of those in our collection. I have the Heartstone, and as Tamara is my favorite character, and pink is my favorite color, I'm rather excited that I have that one.
I want to say I have a Sunstone or a Moonstone.
You probably have a Moonstone.
I think I have a Moonstone.
The Sunstone was part of that very early auctions that started coming out. And I remember, because this is what I remember, this is my memory of it, when it went up for auction, it sold for really cheap. But at the time, we weren't ready to actually invest in this. So we really hadn't thought about the archive. It was just Chris and I, just remembering remember that was fun times, Jewel Riders and things like that. And then we saw that this prototype of this toy that had never shipped was on auction. And I remember calling him and being like, wow, there's this thing. He's like, okay, well, are you going to bid on it? I was like, yeah, I'm going to bid on it. I'm going to put it in a max bid of $75. And I was like, I'm debating those two because that's so much. I'm like, I don't know. Do I really want to spend that? And, it's funny because, later auctions, those things sold for hundreds of dollars. But I think that was one of the first auctions that no one really knew about. So whoever I was bidding against won it for a mere $75.
Yep.
But that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
And Greg, when you're talking about this, I just love when you're talking about your passion and about why it is that you did and do what you do as a toy creator. Because, as an artist and as a designer, you have a vision to want to create this product and you want to share the magic of that storytelling piece from the series or movie or whatever it is. And you want to bring it to fruition in a 3D, handheld, tangible item that a child can play with. And I just love the enthusiasm that you share in those stories as you're talking about being in those board meetings and really telling people, oh, but this could still happen. We could still make this and it'll be a valuable product and it will be something that will be profitable. That's just amazing to me. I love hearing those stories.
So along those lines, one of the funny things I'm dealing with is the last 2 months or so, I've actually been working on Disney and Marvel product that is
interesting.
It's nice because this is the first time I officially got to work on Marvel product. I've done DC, but I got to do some Spider-Man stuff, but very rarely. But so I'm designing all sorts of stuff, and particularly with the Disney characters, which I have such a passion for because I've been doing it for so long. And the funny thing is there's people at Disney who are correcting my work, or at least telling me this won't work because of blah, 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 blah. And I had to send back a nice letter saying, okay, I couldn't say, look, moron, you need to go look at the toy industry and see what's out there because you don't even know what you're talking about. So I'm going to teach you right now. I couldn't say it live. I had to say, okay, so here's the version that Hasbro put out that does this, this, and this, and how it's constructed, and here's the play pattern. Now, ours has this play pattern, so it's not in competition. It's constructed this way, blah, blah. I had to go through that with like 10 different items. And the irony was I kept thinking of is I care more about the integrity of those characters than every one of those people that I'm dealing with, but they'll never understand that. They're Disney employees and they think they've got the market on it, but it's like, I'm sorry, there's things I would never do with any of the Disney characters because that's not the character. The character doesn't do that. The funny thing too is because we showed some of these designs to Walmart because this product was made for Walmart with the Disney and Marvel license, and one of them was an inflatable ball that is a sprinkler, kind of dorky, but it has great artwork on it because I took care of it. And one of the funny things is, so I did Spider-Man one, and so it's got Spider-Man on one side. He looks like he's spraying the water out of his web shooters. It's really cool. And on the other side of the Spider-Man one is Venom. And he's got one shooting out of his mouth, and the other's like shooting out of his tongue because it's really long. It's cool. And it's like, okay, you got your good and bad side. So I did Ariel. And Ariel was really cute. I have one kind of spraying out of Ariel's hand, and then the other one's out of oh, you're such a guppy.
Flounder.
Flounder, thank you. Flounder's mouth, and it's really adorable, and it's kind of like that scene where she's in the grotto, and they kind of do like a fisheye lens on her, even though it's animation. It's really cute, and it's on the ball. Looks great. Looks like she's coming at you. And then on the other side, I actually did put Sebastian and 3 of the fish that are, the flute plays the flute,
right.
And so I put those ones up there, and then 2 of them were spraying the water out, and it's that little scene. My boss didn't like it. And he's probably never even seen the movie, and so he had me put Ursula there. And so I did one with Ursula. I made it perfectly correct, and I put the water spraying out of Flotsam and Jetsam, and that's what my boss wanted in the presentation. And the Walmart buyer took one look at that and said, these are all great, except we are not doing Ursula on this. The little girl doesn't want no one wants to play Ursula. And my boss actually this one time was like, okay, yeah, Greg, I'm on the phone. It was a phone meeting. He's like, yeah, Greg told me not to do that. But I didn't know any better. so I said, okay, this is the one I designed that does this, because it's all about your friends when it's a girl play pattern. And they're like, yes, send us that one. So it was just kind of funny that, I'm very careful about these characters, whether they're Disney characters, whether they're Gwen. To me, it's bringing the character to life and being true to that character.
Right. And, a company like Disney, that's a perfect example of a company that has great assets. And actually, I was talking to another friend who is the web mistress of a princess blog. And I was just talking to her about the integrity of the Disney films. Why is it a generation of children continue to watch a movie from 1937, but yet we can't even get some teenagers to watch another live action movie from 1937. It's like, what makes those Disney movies so timeless? And I think that it has a lot to do with the marketing. It has a lot to do with the fact of the integrity of the characters, and that, they keep it fresh. And it's just like creators like you that are keeping that product alive. Like, you can still go out and you can find merchandise that has that favorite, whether it's a Disney princess, a Star Wars character, a Marvel character, like, you can still find those. There's plenty of other cartoon characters out there that I think are just as iconic, whether it's, Popeye or Felix the Cat or Betty Boop. But I feel like there's also just much more of a niche fandom for those characters. And I think that it's not as diversified. Like, I was even thinking of Wizard of Oz. I don't know if maybe, you were ever involved with this, but I know at Mattel they had done right around the time of like the Disney princesses, they were doing some Wizard of Oz released toys, and they made dolls, from the Barbie molds, and they made games and things like that. Of course, this was also when they had the Warner Brothers store, but it's like, they tried with Wizard of Oz, and I think that still, stays a movie that is fresh and evergreen, but it definitely doesn't have as much appeal, I feel, at least marketing value, as something like Disney or Marvel, unfortunately. Wish it did.
Some of that comes down just to it being animation. And animation can remain, like storybooks, a very timeless looking medium. Even though Snow White is obviously looking very 30s, as opposed to somebody like Aurora who looks very 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Those do not age the same way as seeing like a physical person with, pin curls or, high-waisted pants on a man.
Remind me to come back to the Wizard of Oz question. But actually, the funny thing is I had the same thought process of what you're talking about now. And yes, it does have to do with a lot of what people do to keep the integrity of the characters. But I couldn't stand watching Moana yet again the other day. And my granddaughter wanted to watch something, and I'm like, all right, kiddo, you're going to watch something else. And I put on Lady and the Tramp. Now, we've been watching mostly CG animation stuff because she loves, her favorite movies are Moana and Bolt, which is kind of an interesting choice.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And I made the coolest Bolt. He was dead on. Never hit the market, but anyway, fun product. That was, in fact, I wish I could find. I've got a prototype around the house someplace, and it's like I want to find that for my granddaughter because she'd never put it down again if I gave it to her. But okay, back on track, right? So I put on Lady and the Tramp, and of course, it doesn't have the full roundness of CG. It doesn't have the shadows in the background, and it's very slow at the beginning.
Yes.
But the moment you got into the scene where Tramp took Lady to the Italian restaurant, hey, Butch is back. That scene is magic, absolute, pure magic. Everything they pull off in that, all the way down to sucking on both sides of the spaghetti strand, and then one meatball left, and nosing it over to other people. There was so much tenderness, love, and magic in that scene. And I know that they redid it, and I don't even want to see the redo, but because I can't imagine they could have recreated the magic of that. But there is magic in those old Disney classics that just can't be beat.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a member at the Walt Disney Family Museum in San Francisco, and I've had the opportunity to hear from some of the children of the 9 Old Men who are the animators on those films, and see displays of their artwork, and it's just incredible what they could do. The amount that they could do with just a line, or it's a true art form, and it's a true lost art form, unfortunately, at this point.
Yeah, it is. I actually was fortunate. I got to hear 5 of the 9 Old Men talk before they.
Oh, that's awesome.
And one of them was actually Mark Davis in a small room, a classroom. They were going to the different universities, and they were hunting for talent and getting people to be interested in applying to Disney and stuff. And they brought Mark Davis, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Of course I'm going. I wasn't even in college at the time, and it was just amazing. And you see the work that he's did, and anyway, those men were amazing pioneers that I'm still in awe of their work. I'm still watching it going, oh my gosh, that's magic.
Mm-hmm. Going to art school, since you kind of brought up the subject with regards to people who you look up to and whatnot, a lot of this came because during my cinematography classes, we would have to watch examples of classic film. And we would give examples of, directors that inspired us or something to that effect. And while I can't remember his name, unfortunately, I give the example of the director. I believe that he was German, I want to say. He was the director from Dracula. And then he later went on to also direct I Love Lucy. And the thing is that whenever we would talk about classic media, whether it was classic television, classic movies, the rest of the class just was not interested. Like, they just wanted to talk about the modern movies, the, special effects of the CG and whatnot. And meanwhile, I couldn't hear enough about the practical effects or about the classic cinematography or the pioneers. And so I don't want to say that it's a dying generation, because there are still people out there, young people who are growing up on these movies who are inspired. And yes, there is, modern mediums that people are also inspired by, as you mentioned, Moana and other, new type of ambitions of animation and, using that art form, like, even like stop motion, that's another art form that just doesn't seem to be as mainstream, but it's still very powerful as far as storytelling. I think the thing is that, no matter what type of art it is, it could be live action, it could be animation, CG. Of course, that is animation. I meant like hand-drawn animation. Whatever it is, it needs a strong story. And as kind of a good segue, right now for the archive, we are reading the Avalon Web of Magic book series that was inspired by Princess Gwenevere. And I just finished book 2. And I just filmed something on my phone and I was going to post it on social media, but I am literally crying. Like, there's this juvenile book series, and at the end of the book, the way that the characters interacted and the way that they had, a 180-degree spin on the character, the, emotions of that character and the way that they changed, it literally made me cry. Now, of course, those characters are also based upon the characters that you guys originally created for Joel Riders. So even though they're renamed, as you mentioned, it might have been Harmony and Alex, they later became Tamara and Fallon. I mean, these are renamed Adrian and Emily, but still it's the same principle. So for me, like, even though her name is Emily, I still see and hear Tamara in this character. And the interactions for them just touched me so emotionally. And that is, as a child, why we connected with these types of stories, why we love Princess Guinevere so much. It's the storytelling aspect.
And Guinevere, from the beginning, in Robert's vision, was he wanted a fuller, richer world. He wanted that. He wanted you to see that you were only still getting a glimpse of the world that was much bigger than what you saw on the screen. And he achieved that, obviously, because of the fan following. But that was something he had in mind that he tried to do, and up front, and he succeeded, which was really neat. And it's interesting because you can take that approach, or you can take the approach of, oh, it's for kids, so just slap it together, and which drives me insane.
Yeah,
I do a lot of work with kids. Yeah, and I'm just amazed how many people can't talk to children or have no clue in the world what children want. And I've got people that are, haven't talked to a child in 20 years trying to tell me, no, kids don't want that. And it's like, when was the last time you talked to a child? Just
right. And that's the irony of that.
Me. And it just, yes. And you've got people making decisions that don't, like, no, change it to Ursula. A little girl doesn't want Ursula. And it was another thing. There was a variation of that too. I was making a battle boat, which were really cool. And it was battle boats for Spider-Man and for Iron Man. And because they're starting to get expensive, no one wants to buy a 2-pack anymore. It gets too expensive. So I made a target you could shoot at. And if you filled it up, it would get top heavy and fall over. And of course, on the target was either Venom or it was Ultron. So you got the same fun play. But if you bought 2 of them, then you could shoot each other and you're back to square one. It's just a lower price point. And they were like, we'll make an aerial one. Well, no. That's if a girl wants that play pattern, she's going to go get a Spider-Man one.
Right, she's going to buy the Spider-Man one. Yeah.
And so what I developed instead was I called it Ariel's Misting Paradise. And it was a cute little floating lounge with lots of underwater flowers and Ariel on it, and in nice lavenders and hot pinks and teal, mainly teal. But then it had one flower that you could push on, you could pump on it, and then out of the top of it, kind of like the top of your seat, water would mist out. So you got the fun of squirting water play in the pool, but in a way a girl would appreciate it more, being with her friend Ariel rather than trying to squirt another boy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's so funny, your imagination. It's just like, I would have never thought of that. But looking back at it, now I might not necessarily have wanted that chair, but I think that always looking, at the Disney princess toys, for me, I mean, I never wanted the boy characters. I always, whether it was on a Happy Meal or in the toy aisle, I wanted the girl toys. But, I love it when you talk about all this random stuff and someone could just tell you, oh, this is our idea. And then you just come up with this other idea of like, okay, well, this is what we're going to create and this is what we'll sell. I mean, you're obviously just fantastic at what your career is.
I think like a child, and thank you for saying that. I can still think that way, and I'm still very in touch with kids. I'm very disappointed with the quarantine. I ended up with two different schools that I was working after school programs with, that these kids just wanted someone to have fun and pay attention with them, and so I started becoming their program person. So every Monday I would go to one school and do a program, and every Tuesday the other school. And simple things like, today we're going to build paper airplanes. But, and I would go through some of the science and stuff on it, and also some of the emotional things about, it's kind of like air pressure. Air pressure is what keeps it up in the air, and that's kind of like your friends. Your friends are the things that hold you up. And I always would tie those lessons in together. And so, unfortunately, having, all of this quarantine now has interrupted that. But at least with my Sunday school class, the funny thing is now I'm doing videos for them. So I did video number 4 today. Yes. And actually, you'll get a kick out of this because I was going through the story of the men on the road to Emmaus in the Gospel of Luke. And so one of the men was Aladdin. The other one was Moses, the Moses figure from
Prince of
Egypt. And then actually in another scene, I ended up having, I forgot her, Princess Jasmine. And Belle was in there dressed in biblical robes and things like that. It was just really funny that I specifically used Aladdin and Moses to see if anyone noticed. But it's been funny. It was funny because I just did only one with the toys so far, which is kind of just to break it all up. But it's all about, in this case, it's all about how do you teach children something, but you have to find a way to relate it to something in their world, and then it'll make sense. And that's
almost definitely,
yeah.
And
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you started off the conversation with talking about the power jewels. And, I have to tell you, I don't know if we had already covered this in the previous conversations. I have two thoughts here. So the first thought is, it is a little, I don't want to say it leaves me dumbfounded. I mean, I'm sure there was a plan in there somewhere, but it's just like the jewels were such a core piece and element of the show. Well, then again, we didn't really have like toys, as you could say. Like, I mean, where other series have more toys that are associated with like role play toys. Jewel Riders never really had role play toys. It was just dolls. And then there were some paper goods that were created. That was the core products that were created. But it's like, why was there not the jewels or a jewel box like the one that came with the deluxe Gwenevere, where you could put your jewels in? Like, why was that not part of the very first assortment? Like, why was that not the very first, toy treatment created, essentially?
Actually, it's a very good question, and there's a clear answer, which is small dolls sell better. So we started with the small dolls, and the small dolls should have been the hook to get the children interested. And once again, if the show had been on consistently, we would be having a different conversation right now.
Right.
Yeah, but it was the right thing to do. It was actually in this case, the marketing people at Kenner did the right thing, which is you start on your strongest foot, which is the small dolls. And the next wave of product included the child play, because the child play toys typically sell less. I mean, even like the Moana necklace we just bought. I mean, yes, they shipped them, they sold a bunch of them, but not anywhere near the amount of fashion dolls they sold. So
right, and I can understand that.
Yes, and in my mind, my plan eventually was to do more. I wanted to do, like the headpieces with the flip down visors. I wanted to do,
awesome.
Yeah, and the gauntlets, and I wanted to do Merlin's box too.
Okay.
Yeah, like Merlin's box as a jewelry box for kids would have been such a great piece.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, and the other reason why is because a lot of the people that we talk to when they're reminiscing, that seems to be the thing that's consistent with all of us. We all made our own form of the jewels, which I guess, even though something never shipped, the thing is that it sparked our creativity. So whether people were making these out of resin, out of wood, out of paper, whatever resource they had, we all created our own versions of the jewels. And so it brought out the creative side in us. And I think that from a connection with a show where we have enough dedication to it that we want to make our own stuff, that says a lot, and
I totally agree.
And something that I wanted to also say, again, I don't know if we had talked about this. I know that during the previous conversation at length, we talked about the Disney Classic Collection. One quick thing about it, when you were talking about the mask set, so right now when you're saying, no kid wants to play with Ursula, no, this or that. I was that kid, though, that I really wanted the villains as dolls. So when Mattel released those mask sets of the stepmother from Cinderella, of Maleficent, of the Evil Queen, I loved them. I wish that they had been dolls by themselves. I love the fact that they had masks, but I took that idea and I made my own, I guess you could say, like paper doll versions of them, but I put them on my actual like fashion dolls. I made King Triton and Ursula for the Little Mermaid dolls. Now, I know that those were under Tyco and not Mattel, but I was trying to create something similar like what Mattel was doing, but for my Tyco Little Mermaid dolls. So you also inspired me in that sense, where I was creating King Triton and Ursula as like a mask set that you could put on your dolls.
I did the same thing as a child. If I didn't have the toy of whatever character it was, I would make it. I would, and of course, at that age and with my abilities, they were horrible little things. But in my mind, it was that character, and I had so much fun doing that. And I occasionally run across one going, oh, that's a little weird. Oh yeah, it was one of those. And I don't know if I did I ever tell you the stories about the big elaborate backyard battles I would have with my kids and the toys?
No. What happened?
Okay. Well, this is a longer story, but so my daughter would play anything with me. I could get her to play boy toys, girl toys, didn't matter. So we would play Princess Gwenevere one day, we'd play Barbies another day, we'd play Hot Wheels, and occasionally we would do G.I. Joes, and I would set up these big adventures, and then we would pick figures and we would go all the way through it. And sometimes I would shoot a bunch of pictures of it, and like I've got one that I shot a bunch of pictures of, which was from one of my favorite heroes, which was the Phantom, very obscure, but he was a hero in the jungle. And so we did this elaborate, like 6 different scenes and traps that they had to get through. It was almost like playing King Solomon's Mines. And my daughter and I would play these, and it would take us about 2 hours to set up, and another at least an hour to play all of the scenes. And you take whatever you have and you'd make like a big giant, you take a net from a volleyball net and you take giant rubber spiders. And that was the giant spider pit. Don't go in there. The bad guys would slip and they would get stuck in there. And then I had a bunch of Big Jims. Big Jim was only like 10 inches as opposed to G.I. Joe at roughly 12 inches. But I had Big Jack. Now, hopefully I'm not offending anyone by this, but Big Jack was the African-American figure. But he was the perfect size next to G.I. Joe of pygmies. And I had a few of them. So I dressed them up as pygmies. And so the pygmies took out some of the bad guys on one of the trails. And it was always just building whatever you had into. Actually, we took the sandbox. And then we had like scorpions come out of that. And there was something they had to find in the sandbox. And we did big elaborate battles. My son didn't grow up with that. I tried, but he played boys' toys only, but he was very much into Pokemon. So, and I couldn't get him into G.I. Joe. What I finally did was I realized, okay, battles, Pokemon. Let me, if I put it in that scenario, maybe he'll get it. So one day I told him, I said, okay, here's a box of superheroes. They were all like G.I. Joe size superheroes. I said, okay, pick 10. What am I picking them for? We're going to have a giant adventure. Pick 10 that you think will survive. And then he picked the 10, and I went and finished the scenarios. And then I went up and I handed him a little scroll, and it was by the Riddler. They didn't make a Riddler. Yes, I made my own Riddler. And it was a note from the Riddler, and he had to go to the basement and find something. So, and then like one of the things ended up being a wreath that was on the floor. And I had some extra vines and things attached, and Poison Ivy was there. So when his superheroes got close to it, Poison Ivy attacked. And then I had to say, okay, who's going to attack Poison Ivy? Who's your hero on this one? And then we would do shot for shot, just like Pokemon. Like freeze ray, stinging, carnivore plant, and we did all these different scenarios. One of the scenarios was a place that was populated with robots. So it was in a big Attack of the Robot War. And it just all the way along. I did manage to kill off about 5 of his superheroes along the way, just because I had the right, freeze ray against Johnny Lightning. Not Johnny Lightning. I'm sorry.
Johnny Quest.
No, I wanted Johnny Quest. Love Johnny Quest. The flame guy.
Oh, the Torch. The Human Torch, yeah.
Torch. Yeah.
That's the other Johnny I was thinking of.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I managed to wipe him out with a freeze ray, but it took that interaction. That's what my son needed to be able to understand how to play G.I. Joes. If I did it in a hit battle, going back and forth scenario, he could understand it. And we did this a few times and had just, we would play for hours on these. And he killed off, like 36 bad guys, which were cannon fodder, but still, just to have the fun of it.
Those are such wonderful memories. And I can say, it's interesting how I think that if you just have a creative gene in you, it's very similar. I mean, there's so many stories that I could just start rattling off as well. I'll just kind of give a quick highlight. But when you're talking about those moments that you spent with your children, it was very similar with my dad and I. And he is of the same generation where he grew up with action figures. And it's really thanks to him that I even got into collecting. So whether it was collecting dolls, comics, books, whatever it might be, he's the one that really inspired me for that. And similarly, we would also play where I was Batman. And so I had a cape, again, the importance of role play toys. And my stepmom would leave notes and she'd be like, oh, this toy is hidden here or this is hidden here. And you'd have to go around the house and look for those things. And so that was my Batman play. Similarly, when Chris and I were young, again, the power of creating toys when you don't have them we were thinking about, branded Lego toys before they even made these cross-promotioned, sets. We were making Jewel Rider Legos. Like, we used our castle sets of the Legos to pretend like they were Jewel Riders. And they even had like a little dragon wagon and everything that we played with. And we had the Merlin character. And again, it was just, you use what you have to tell the story. And as I said, that's why we just love these properties so much, is because of the storytelling and because of how strong it is,
Yes.
So speaking of, I did want to start talking about the development of the actual toys. So when we were talking about the first wave, and we talked a little bit about pre-production, and I think at length we kind of talked about obviously your passion and why you do what you do, and from the history that you've had with Mattel and with Disney into Hasbro and Kenner, and how that all kind of worked together. But regarding the first wave of the dolls and of the toys, when you were first tooling them, I mean, obviously you had an idea of what the product is that you wanted to create. And right now we're organizing a lot of the photos and a lot of the assets that we have at the archive, preparing for the 25th anniversary to tell a comprehensive story of not only how the toys came about, but what was really the thinking behind it. And I think that I have to remember sometimes, when a prototype is created, that's kind of just, okay, we're giving you, an idea of what this toy line could possibly look like. This is obviously not the finished product, but I look at some of the toys from like Enchanted Camelot with like the pink unicorn, and there's this like sequin saddle over it, and it's a very ornate toy. And I think, well, would this have ever really been produced like this? And the answer is, no, it probably would have been changed, or maybe it would have become plastic pieces. But, it's still interesting to kind of see the ideas that you had when you were creating these toys and seeing photos of them. So, from the transition from Enchanted Camelot to the final, first wave of toys, what was kind of the story there? What was the timeline? When did that start? How long or, did it take? Kind of those general questions.
And timeline is key, because and we talked about this before, but let me go over it again just for the context of this audio. What Kenner did in their process was they would identify different properties that they thought would make a good toy, and then they would put together a mock toy line of what it would be. And I was asked to do Enchanted Camelot, and I was asked to do Princess Tenko, and there was a third one that we already had done. Someone else in my department did it. I don't remember who it was or what the property was. Totally forgot what it was. And we showed those 3 or possibly 4 different concepts to the kids, and then the kids would rate them. Which one was your favorite? Which one you were most likely to buy? Which one are you least likely to buy? And from that data, with strangers, but with kids, they would say, okay, this is strong enough to continue. In making those models, you don't have a lot of time. So do you have the photograph of wait, let me make sure I have it in front of me, because I pulled out a few things. So one of the things that we did was this beautiful castle that expanded up. And it's like it folded down into just like a keep, because, of course, they didn't have the castle designed at the time. And looking through.
Yeah, and I think that's key for people who are listening to this to realize a lot of the times when you're looking at these products, those prototypes, whether it's the jewelry castle box or it's the enchanted toys, yes, they don't look like the final designs, but that's because the show had not been designed yet. Like, this was just to get, as you said, to get that data.
Yeah, this is like a rough concept, basically.
So I've got 3 images, and I thought I might have seen these already on your site. One is the castle. It's a lavender castle. It's all opened up, and it's got like a frilly bed, and I can't remember what the other frilly thing is. Okay, so you got that one. And then there was one that showed the animals, which, in this one had the purple lion, and it had the wolf, and it had the first version of Sunstar, and then the baby animals. Do you have that one?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the Enchanted Camelot Kit Bash, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So, and I actually made all of those. And then there's the figures, and it was a set of 4 figures. So when it came to making those figures, of course, I read everything that Robert had given us on Enchanted Camelot. Went through it all, and the styling was okay, but it was honestly styling that was done by animators. And my background was costume design specifically, and so the costumes weren't good enough for me. I wanted something grander, something better. And also, I needed it to look different than all the other cutesy, fluffy things that were on the market. I mean, if you looked at what was out there, I mean, there was Rose Petal Place, which was adorable. Didn't last very long, unfortunately.
I have a friend who's really into collecting those.
Yeah, and Peppermint Rose was the one I was originally thinking. I worked on that at Mattel too. And then
I have this wonderful Peppermint Rose advertisement with this just beautiful art. I'll have to scan that.
I know which one you mean. Actually, I think I know that one.
Greg, while you're rattling off all these properties, something interesting for me just to kind of quickly interject. As people have, gathered, I am a huge Disney fan. And aside from the influences of my father of trying to, get me to watch Batman and other superheroes that were close to his heart, there was really one other property as a child that I really gravitated towards, and that was like Power Rangers. I also liked Wizard of Oz, but Gwenevere was the very first property that really drew my attention kind of away from Disney. So there's this kind of dark spot where it went from, 89 during the Renaissance of Little Mermaid all the way through Aladdin. Even when there was Aladdin on, I still liked Power Rangers and Aladdin at the same time. And then 94 happened and my dad was just all over Lion King, and it was okay. I think I started liking Barbie more at that time. But then in 95, when Chris showed me Jewel Riders, I just didn't pay attention to Disney. I still watched Pocahontas and I liked Hunchback, but it's straight there for about 2 or so years. It was just kind of I like this property more than I like Disney. And that says a lot.
Yeah. And frankly, as soon as they hit I think they peaked just before Pocahontas, and Hunchback of Notre Dame was like, what?
As a child, it's very different. But I think that, now as an adult, you watch it and you're like, wow, this is such a beautiful piece of artwork,
Yeah. Yeah.
But child storytelling wise, it's all off.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. They missed. It was just kind of a missed mark. The story is about lust, and they're trying to show it to the kids, and it's like,
right.
Okay. But back to Gwenevere, what I wanted a doll line that had some of the really cool parts of Camelot, which in my mind, Camelot is armor. Camelot is like the movie Excalibur by John Borman.
Yeah.
All of that beautiful, glistening, gleaming armor. I know that armor was, 500 years later than Arthur would have been, but it looked great. And so I wanted to get that fun, gleaming armor, but I wanted to still keep it fun and soft for girls. I was trying to kind of walk that line between of fashion action. And so these models that I created, I'm looking at a picture of them now, were trying to get that blend of fluffiness and metallic armor, which had really never been done before. There was a version where they put these kinds of fabrics together on. It was a robot line that was an offshoot of Barbie,
and
I forgot its
Spectra
name
and the
now.
Shimmerons.
Spectra. That's it. Yes. Technically, they used the same fabrics, but they didn't come up with anywhere near this look. And this, I think, this was an interesting look. The kids were gravitating towards, these female characters are actually wearing armor. they are much more like warriors, but they're obviously cute fashion warriors. And so
the perfect combination.
I want that to be the new tagline for the show. Cute fashion warriors.
We're going to slay our enemies in style.
Exactly. I love it.
Yeah. And so I tried to keep that in the figures themselves. I was not able to afford the vacuum metallizing that was on the original figures. And it was interesting because I cheated when I made these. I took a film like that you'd use to do wrapping paper,
like a cellophane type film.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. I took that and I spray mount and I sprayed it down to clear plastic, and then I vacuum formed the shapes, and it actually stayed. I wasn't sure if it would work, and that's how I made these. And the funny thing is, some of the edging where it looks like they all have it actually, where it looks like it's a very particular type of armor. It's I forgot the name of it. It almost looks like feathers, but it's that overlapping armor. And the funny thing is that was actually the background. Scale mail. Thank you. That's it. It was actually the background of the vacuum former where it pulled the air through the netting, and it actually gave this great effect. So I used the little basic chest pieces, and then I augmented it with those because they had so much great detail on them. I just loved it.
Now, I think that we're going to have to point out specifically which armor pieces you're looking at, because not being able to see it, like I'm trying to picture the photo that we're looking at. So I think you're going to have to include that either in an email or describe exactly which photo you're looking at.
I will set this aside and make sure and send you a photograph of it, because yes, I'm looking directly at it. Because these are made from the Disney musical princesses, and they're actually standing on their jewel stones. I used those as the stands at the time, but which I thought would be really, really cool too. But that had to go away for cost. But they're still. I mean, I'm looking at them now and I'm still going, wow, these are just fun and different.
Yeah, that might be a new photograph that we actually haven't seen before, because the only prototype that we've seen is the Jasmine Gwenevere with the flipping Merlin. That's the only character prototype that we've ever seen.
Oh, I got it. Okay, I'll send you pictures.
Yes, we're so excited to see all of that.
More.
Please.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I wanted to ask you about some other pictures later, because I found some other stuff that I can't remember if it was used or not. But let's finish the story of this. So from here, cost is very, very important. I couldn't afford the vacuum metallizing, but I could make the armor crystal. And I could make it out of K-resin. I could put some tinting with it, and it could still have a glowing effect. And what I ended up doing was I wanted the armor to become a visual manifestation of the jewel magic. And so that's why the armor always matched the jewel, because that was the magic sent out from the jewel. It armored up Gwenevere, or armored up armored up Fallon. And so I was very conscious to keep that in anything I did. And I also tried as best I could to make pieces that you could lay on top of each other, which you can with several of these.
And it's interesting when you're talking about the different types of fabric types, the types of metals that you were looking at using. And I think that, just creating something that is actually going to be achievable at mass production by a toy company, but yet still tell that story of magic and armor. We love the way that the final product came out. And when we're talking about the fashion, though, you had mentioned, yes, the different types of mail or the different types of armor might not have been from that era. I mean, that's the thing about a lot of these properties as animation, is that they aren't historically accurate. They're just set in this magical once upon a time. That doesn't mean it was, hundreds of years ago. That could be 100 years ago. That could be 500 years ago. It could be 1,000 years ago. It's just once upon a time. And I think that the same thing is said for Jewel Riders. But if you could give us a quick kind of explanation, especially from a theatrical background, is there kind of an inspiration that you drew from, whether it was time periods or people, or was this even inspired by just the fashion of the 90s? Like, what inspired the general look?
Well, because of when you're doing it, you can't help but be inspired by what's around you at the time. But the very first step of what I used to start creating all of these looks was medieval books on armor. And there's different parts of armor that are being used. Like if you look at, well, let me get some pictures out.
Mm-hmm.
So, year one, Gwenevere. Okay, so the main three characters had basically shoulder armor and gauntlets, or in the case of Tamara, she had armbands. And then they all had I couldn't stand having just another comb that gets lost. Like, how many Barbie combs do you really need? I threw away 2 Barbie combs yesterday because it's like, anyway, didn't need it anymore. And so I wanted to use also that piece of plastic, that money. I used every cent I could and made a shield that was also the comb. And they also had, Tamara had snap-on greaves.
Yes.
Okay. And then, of course, they all had the headpieces that would flip back and forth. If you go to looking at Sun Power Gwenevere, which was one of my favorites, she was
one
really
of my
cool.
favorites as well.
Oh, cool. Actually, if you look at I'm looking at the catalog shot right now, and that body, at least the lower part of that body is actually one of the princesses. One of the musical princesses, because notice that her knees are not bent the same way. It's kind of funny. Okay. But on her, I went with a different point of armor. So that one was more of almost like a bustier, but it had the bottom shape of armor that's on some of the armor from just before the Renaissance period time. And if you snap that, you could snap that same piece of armor on. Actually, you could snap the shoulder armor from the normal Princess Gwenevere on top of that, and then she had even more armor, which was kind of cool. And it was very common in the medieval that you would have a headdress that you could put a crown onto. So I molded her head specifically that way so you could put a crown on it, and then she had a plug of hair out the back of it. But even if you look at her side, I know that there's a name for those, and I can't think of it, but those were incredibly medieval. That outfit that she's wearing is very, very medieval. Well, actually, the sleeves specifically, but the sleeves were hiding something. Let's go back to sleeves in a second. But on her head, there was...
Oh, that netted piece, the one that goes over the head. Yes. I don't know the name of it.
Yes. I made that very specifically that way. And unfortunately, I didn't get to put the wrap on the figure because that's not the way it was supposed to go.
Oh, do tell, because as a child, that thing was horrible. Like, you would put it on and, like, it would just pop off because the crown, the tiara that was on top, was not strong enough to keep it down.
No, and it was never meant to be. It was really meant to be a scarf, a glorified scarf around her neck.
I gotcha. So it wasn't meant to be put around her head.
Yeah, it really
wasn't meant to be tied like a Jackie O scarf around her head.
Well, it had a little loop on it because I had to. It was like back to there was pennies on these I was trying to save. Actually, let me sidestep a story for a second. On the main Gwenevere doll, her margin was, let's say, 28.9 or 28.9. It was 28.95, and it had to be 30. And there was nothing else to take off on this doll. I mean, nothing to hit that. And so I tried to explain to my director at the time, look, there's nothing else to take it. We're only doing rough costing here. When it goes to Asia, they'll give us real costing. I don't care. I need that to be 30. Blah, 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 blah. So I went back to the costing director and said, look, I can't budge him. You and I have worked on this. There's nothing else to take on this. What do you recommend? He looks at it, changes the number, goes, hey, look, you got it to 30.
So he just faked it. He didn't really.
He faked it because it was fake to begin with. It's not like we were, but it was that close. That's like anyone normal, instead of this particular boss, would have looked at it and said, close enough, let's go with it. But he was particular.
Well, that's again those leaders that are more financially oriented, which I guess is great as a director, but also you need to let the creatives, do their work and then make adjustments later.
Exactly. And it was like you could never understand that what we were doing at this point was rough. Once it went to Asia, it was going to change a little bit more. So
if you enjoyed this episode with Greg, tune in again on August 10th for our 4th interview with him. If you want to find more about the Jewel Writers Archive, you can find us at www.jewelwritersarchive.com or on any social media at Jewel Writers Archive. If you want to find out more about Greg's work in the toy industry, you can find his blog, 12-Inch Treasures, linked in the podcast notes below. And remember, friends together, friends forever. Bye, everyone.